Hi, Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-founder of Denver Startup Week. Denver Startup Week is the largest free entrepreneurial event in the world, and it's only possible thanks to the support of our sponsors. We have nearly 40 sponsor companies who contribute to Denver Startup Week and make it possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our title sponsors, the Downtown Denver Partnership, JP Morgan Chase, Prologis, and Zero. And our track sponsors who help make the great content you're hearing today possible. Battery 621 and the Public Works, Capital One Cafe, Colorado Lending Source, Friday Health, Quizlet, Exactly, Zayo, and Zestful. Our headline event sponsors are bringing you inspiration from around the country. Thank you to Wix, Kenzen, MAPR Agency, Obsidian HR, Kickstart Fund, Promontory Mortgage, Molson Coors, and Comcast. And finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors. They're all listed on the screen. Thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get to it.
It's time for a whole new way to think about sales planning, execution, and optimization. To let go of old habits and embrace a data-driven mindset. Our revolutionary approach to sales performance management will get your sales unstuck and fundamentally transform your business to create lasting success. It's time to unleash your true sales power.
Welcome to day 3 of Denver Startup Week. I'm Ashley Cloud, People Track Chair, and a member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you so much for joining our first Denver Startup Week. One of my very favorite things about startups is that we are constantly trying new things and learning every step of the way. That's exactly what we're doing this week with our first virtual Denver Startup Week. So thank you so much for going on this journey with us, for trying something new together, and for your graciousness, your patience, and your kindness as we work through any technical kinks that we have this week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of any of those. We try to make sure there's something for everyone and that everyone sees themselves in Denver Startup Week. A few things coming up after the session today at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, we have Startup Cribs. Does place still matter? And at 5 p.m. for anyone who needs a little bit of distressing and a bit of joy in their life, we have our annual puppy panel. So who doesn't need more puppies in their life? So we appreciate our sponsors, especially our People Track sponsor, Exactly, our volunteers, our session organizers, and our community for helping make this week happen. It's our 9th year and we couldn't do it without you. So, and thanks so much for joining us today at this session. This land was made for you and me, diversity and inclusion in outdoor recreation. People of color and other diverse identities have long been underrepresented in the outdoor industry and in its marketing campaigns, despite their undeniable purchasing power. They aren't shown, so they can't be seen. And that's a huge problem for many reasons. Let's listen, learn, and engage with this panel as they discuss breaking down barriers, initiatives to increase diversity and inclusion, and practical ways we as a community can tackle this head on. With that said, I will turn it over to our awesome moderator, Mike.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for Denver Startup Week for hosting this amazing event and also for hosting this amazing panel. So I'm happy to host and happy to introduce you to a great set of panelists. I have Kalima Bluford. She's with Camber Outdoors, will be one of our panelists. Avanti Shura with the Colorado Office of Outdoor Recreation Industry Office, which I sometimes will refer to as OREC, and Annalise Lovely with Icelandic Skis. So feel free to join us now by unmuting yourselves and opening up your video. Thank you for being part of this panel. Excited to have you all on board. And I think Ashley did a good job of an overview, but I want to just add on that a little bit by saying, each of these panelists has a great perspective to bring to this, and I am really excited to hear what they want to share with you today. We're going to be primarily focusing on diversity and inclusion in the outdoor recreation industry with regards to the workforce, and what Canberra Outdoors is doing in the workforce. We'll also be focusing on increasing access to the outdoors for populations that may not always have access. And that's one of the items that Avanti is going to chime in on. And then Annalise is going to talk a little bit about breaking down barriers within the industry and her role as CEO, but also expanding your perspective as to what outdoor recreation includes. So I'll give a just brief overview about myself and then let each of the panelists introduce themselves. My name is Mike Dill. I'm a partner in the corporate group of Holland & Hart, and I co-lead our outdoor recreation industry practice group. So we're a large law firm, but we have a bunch of different participants that advise outdoor recreation companies here in the Front Range with all kinds of legal matters that they may be facing. So this is something that's near and dear to our hearts and to our clients' hearts. And so we're happy to be here and happy to host. So I'm gonna first ask Kalima, if you don't mind introducing yourself, but if you can do it by saying a little bit more about either what unique experience that you've had in the outdoors or the outdoor industry, or sort of what's drawn you to where you're at today at Canberra Outdoors, and maybe just explain a little bit more about your role at Canberra.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here with Denver Startup Week. It's an exciting thing. This is my first experience, first of many hopeful to come. In any event, I was born into the outdoor industry. My father was an outdoorsman. And so my folks are from the deep South. And so, there they do a lot of hunting and fishing and spending a lot of time in camping and things like that. And so that's what I grew up with. And so I'm the youngest of 10 and was the only one born in California. Everyone else was born in the deep South. So they were able to bring that outdoorsman mentality to California and give me that same experience as well. What I do with Canberra Outdoors, I'm the diverse talent pipeline manager, and my core responsibility is building content and data to help companies in the active outdoor economy gain access to tools and resources that help them build that diverse talent pipeline from a recruiting and human resource and hiring perspective. And so we've done a lot of work. We recently launched what we call our diverse talent pipeline learning sprint. And through that learning sprint, where we're teaching individuals how to implement those systems.
That's great. Well, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of value to add. And I'm curious if you have any unique family recipes when it comes to cooking fish or anything.
Oh, yeah.
So Avanti, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about your unique or interesting experiences you've had in the outdoors?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. I'm Avanti Sura. I work as the operations manager for the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office. We are housed under the Office of Economic Development and International Trade under the governor's offices. I've been in this role for just over a year now. I previously worked at the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics in Boulder and then Colorado Mountain School in marketing and communications-based positions. And then I volunteered at Bicycle Colorado for a while, which is how I actually got connected to ORIT in this position. Somewhere in between, I spent 2 years living out of a backpack and just traveling around the world, completing some of the longer backpacking hikes that were on my list. And then I spent about 5 years teaching Iyengar yoga full-time before jumping back into the outdoor recreation industry very recently. In terms of my first experience with outdoors, I would say it was back in school, growing up in Pune, a city in India on the west coast of India, where my father would take us hiking to the mountains that we had close by the Sahyadris, actually every other weekend. And I think that definitely helped instill this love of the outdoors at a really young age. And it's only grown as I've grown older, I would say.
Wow, that's great. So if you've traveled across the world for 2 years backpacking, first of all, that's extremely impressive. But what I'm curious is,
Thank you.
what's your favorite place you've ever been to? Because there's probably pretty unique ones, but
That's a hard question. Well, I have to say Colorado because I'm partial and I do absolutely love Colorado. I think we're lucky to be living here so close to our amazing mountains. But I would say my second favorite would be Patagonia. It's just unbelievably gorgeous.
that's great. That's awesome. I'll have to book my next trip to Patagonia.
Absolutely. I'm happy to give you
I
a
haven't
tip.
been there yet, I guess. Thanks, Avanti.
Yeah.
So, Annalise, can you talk a little bit more? I know you grew up in Colorado, but can you talk a little bit more about some of your first experiences with the outdoors, but also what your role is with Icelandic?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So I am the CEO of Icelandic, and I'm one of the founders. We started the company 15 years ago in the mountains just west of Denver here, up in Evergreen. And it was a group of middle school friends. You know, we've been friends since middle school, and we all kind of decided to, I don't know, make a ski company. We didn't know what we were doing. And here we are 15 years later, still doing it. I grew up here in Idaho Springs. So just 30 minutes up I-70. And I've seen Colorado transform and the outdoor industry really like take shape in Colorado. And my first memories, my father's from Norway and my parents met in Norway. And so a lot of his kind of culture was brought over with them when they moved back to the States. And so we just were an outdoor family. Every minute that we weren't inside eating as a family or something, we were basically forced to be outside. And I grew up in the mountains, so my first friends were rabbits and deer and trees and birds. And so I just had a connection with nature from very early on, and we'd ski every weekend. And so yeah, it's just kind of in our blood. Nature was kind of our church and our place to connect with each other and with ourselves. And
great. Well, that explains a little bit more. I mean, I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth, but it does explain a little bit more of Return to Nature being one of Icelandic's logos, being how instrumental it's been in your life. Thanks for the introductions. I'm gonna ask our audience. We're gonna go through some questions for each of the panelists, but I would love for you. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to chime in as we're talking, and then we will save the last around 20 minutes or so to 15 to 20 minutes to answer your questions. So please type those in as we go along, and we'll get to those towards the end of the session. So the first topic I want to spend a little bit more time digging in about is with you, Kalima, and it really is diversity in the workplace. And I know you've kind of talked a little bit more about your role and what you're in charge of, but can you talk a little bit more about Camber Outdoors and what they do to help companies in the outdoor industry focus on promoting diversity and inclusion in the workplace? What are some of these toolkits that you guys offer?
Absolutely. Camber Outdoors has done such a great job of reaching out to corporations and companies within the active outdoor economy. But what we're doing is we're actually providing tools and resources that they can access that help begin what we call diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so in many cases, corporations, they vary in different sizes, but how do I get started? And so Camber Outdoors has done a great job of providing that content, building blocks on how to integrate DEI into your organization. And then specifically around diversity in the workplace, what we did is we took the entire hiring process, and that hiring process begins with your job description. And we built what we call our diverse talent pipeline learning sprint. And what that means is it's not just theory of us just teaching you content. What we do is we teach, you apply. We teach, you apply. And so through this learning sprint, we're starting at the beginning with the job description, because the job description is the very first insight that a potential job seeker would have into your company. So ensuring that the language is inclusive and doesn't have a lot of biases and other things that would turn other people or not be as inviting to other individuals. We work with them to learn how to develop that inclusive and diverse and equitable job description. And we go through the entire process of excluding biases, making sure that you're providing information for the entire process.
So I would think that you being part of Canberra Outdoors would kind of have a high standard as promoting diversity and inclusion as sort of your job, right, as a nonprofit. How do you do it yourselves, right? How have you seen it when you joined Canberra Outdoors, either in your hiring process, or what have things that you've seen that are different at Canberra Outdoors than you've seen at other organizations you've been a part of?
So definitely understand, I bring roughly 25 years experience. I started when I was 2, but 25 years experience in human resources and nonprofit. And so I've seen quite a few different hiring processes that aren't always that inclusive. And so Canberra Outdoors, we practice every preach. So the hiring process, the job descriptions, all of those things were thoughtfully and purposefully pulled together so that anyone that's applying for the job can see themselves working there. Their mission is grounded in DEI, and I always say don't use jargon because everyone doesn't understand jargon. However, their mission, the foundation, the very foundation of the organization, and the CEO, Emily Newman, who's wonderful, the entire mission is built around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it makes everyone feel comfortable being there. It's a great team to be a part of.
Yeah, that's great. I've had a lot of great interactions with you and with Emily and with other people at Canberra's, and they're always extremely happy to be for the organization. So that shows through. Given that you guys focus on the outdoor industry, what are you seeing as some of the challenges that continue to arise, right, or that are more prevalent maybe in the outdoor industry than you would see in other industries with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
What I would say about the active outdoor industry, it's a passion industry. Mm-hmm. So typically, individuals that are passionate about a specific thing tend to huddle groups. And so I say the industry is hyper network, but it's really, do you know someone for a job? Do you know someone for a job? And so we tend to stay within our network. However, the work that Canberra Outdoors is doing is really helping our corporate partners to get out of that mindset and provide them with tools and resources on how to reach out to organizations and other industries and individuals that wouldn't necessarily even know that there's an active outdoor industry. My mindset is, if individuals know about these jobs, they're going to come running. And so we just have to get the word out. And then we have to also change the mindset of those that are doing all of the interviewing and make sure that there's no unconscious bias in place, and everything is inclusive that they present to the candidate so the candidate can see themselves working in that industry.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that every industry, right, has sort of unique challenges. And I have seen that hyper network in the industry. Somebody, everybody, right? But finding that first connection can be hard. Yes. Sort of breaking into the industry for the first time. So I definitely have observed that personally, but I have also said, right, I've observed once you're part of the outdoor industry and a few people, it's kind of like everyone's your friend, right? Everyone's about the industry. They love being part of it. They could make a lot more money in a different industry, right? But they choose to be part of it because they're passionate about it.
Absolutely.
So that's great. So you've mentioned this learning sprint a couple of times, but and I understand how it relates to, you know, a job description, right? To try to get people on board that are interested in positions from the very beginning. But can you talk at all about what happens once somebody's been hired, right? Like what other tools do you guys offer your companies to help ensure that they're not just hiring, right, but retaining, promoting, and just fostering a more diverse workplace, whether it be part of the learning sprint or other programs that you guys have?
Absolutely. So my suggestion is always that everyone have an understanding that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just a project, it's a journey. And so it has to be ingrained into the culture of your organization. And you also have to do some research, and you have to do some work. You have to create measurement tools that measure individuals coming in the door all the way through retention. You have to measure who comes through the door, for who applies for the job. You have to measure how many got through to the next step. You have to measure who was hired, why they were hired, whether, you know, what made them a better candidate over others. And then later on down the line, you have to look at retention. Okay, so all of these things that I put in place, did it improve retention? Did it improve the culture of my organization? Did it improve? And are the individuals that came through that process, that modified and improved process, did they advance further down the line into management and other leadership positions? So it's a journey that you have to take, and you have to constantly go back and review and upgrade, because life changes every day. People change every day. And so you have to be able to stay in step with the ebbs and flows of diversity, because it's ever changing.
That's great. And I actually have seen just this week, I don't know if you noticed it, there was a report by VF Corp where they did their first public release of I don't know the exact title, but it was a diversity, equity, and inclusion report, right? Where they studied their own practices and been doing it for around 5 years, but they hadn't made it public until now. And it was really eye-opening to see how do they track, right? How do they track their processes? How do they determine whether they're being successful with the measures they're implementing or not? And I think that they've been doing a great job. I remember one of the statistics was almost 60% of candidates that they've recruited have been there after a certain period of time. So anyways, I think that is becoming something that we're seeing more public facing too, that companies say, hey, we know this is important, but we're going to be putting ourselves out there and keeping ourselves accountable for what we're saying we're doing.
Absolutely.
Notice some of that too, Kalima.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very important to have those measurements in place, because the data doesn't lie.
Yeah, that's a great way to put that. And there may be other questions, so feel free to chime in, Kalima, as we talk a little about these other topics. Same with you, Avanti and Annalise. But I want to transition to you, Avanti, and ask a little bit more about diversity in regards to access to the outdoors. So not just working in the outdoor industry, but making sure that you're able to sort of recreate in the outdoors. And so can you maybe talk a little bit more about OREC's, because this is a part of OREC's mission, but maybe do you mind talking about OREC's mission and purpose, and then how this topic relates to that?
Yeah, of course. So just to give a little bit of a background, the office, or OREC, as we're called, was formed back in 2015 as a central point of contact, advocacy, and resources at the state level for the diverse constituents, businesses, and communities which rely on the health of our outdoor recreation economy. As I mentioned, we are a division of OREC, and then this placement really allows the office to have access to a wide range of state as well as local resources that we can then connect with businesses. So really play the role of convener and connector for the outdoor recreation industry, for all outdoor recreation industry matters. So this includes attracting, retaining, expanding businesses, partnering with outdoor the industry to protect and conserve lands, water, and air, And then, of course, promote efforts that increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors. And this is to ensure that all of Coloradans can benefit from the health of our outdoor recreation industry. Our mission at the office is to champion communities and people to thrive through Colorado's great outdoors. And then we do this by focusing on 4 impact areas, as we call them, our priority areas. So that is economic development, conservation and stewardship, education and workforce training, and then public health, wellness, and safety, which includes the promotion of sustainable and inclusive access to outdoor recreation.
That's a lot. One of the things that you mentioned, though, is promoting diversity, inclusion, and access to the outdoors as part of a broader mission of OREC. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about initiatives that OREC is doing, and maybe even other organizations at the state that are doing to promote that aspect?
Yeah, of course. Let me start by saying this is by no means a comprehensive list. There's just so much work already being done around this topic in the industry. And we're constantly learning about all the diverse perspectives and how we can really support DI efforts at being a government agency. As I mentioned, our greatest strength as an office is being a partner and convener. And we're really fortunate to work with some of these incredible organizations who are doing great work in their communities to make the outdoors more accessible. I want to highlight some of the work being done by our advisory group organizations. So Environmental Learning for Kids, or ELK as they go by, is one of them. It's a really great nonprofit that introduces underserved urban youth to the outdoors through service learning projects. So many of the youth that ELK serves, it's usually their first experience with the outdoors. And through science and environmental education, which is basically embedded in all of ELK's programs and initiatives, they help further those students' understanding and attitude towards the outdoors, their communities, as well as a sense of environmental stewardship. And then I want to also mention Natives Outdoors. Len Nessifer is another one of our advisory group members, and it's another great organization which supports Indigenous communities through their products and storytelling. So the organization was initially started by Len to highlight stories and photos of Native people in the outdoor recreation industry to address kind of the lack of representation of those Indigenous people in the industry. And then another one that I just want to mention is inclusion on the slopes. We were recently invited to be on the advisory board of that. It's a national effort led by Dr. Geraldine Davis to create a winter recreation economy that's more accessible and welcoming to BIPOC communities. In terms of events, earlier this summer, we partnered with Elevate Conservation, if you've heard of that, and then 30 other outdoor recreation organizations to host a virtual event. It was virtual for the first time. Usually it's in person at outdoor retailer called Outdoors for All, which focused entirely on diversity and inclusion in the outdoor recreation industry. So it was a really great event. It highlighted some of the work already being done in this sphere, as well as honored the folks who are leading these efforts. So again, really good publicity. And then lastly, speaking in terms of funding, I want to say that our office has a partnership with the Western Colorado University. So specifically the outdoor industry MBA program over there. We offer 2 fellowships annually to support racial and cultural diversity within the student body. So specifically first generation students, as well as students who are looking to support DEI efforts through their MBA projects and beyond. And then one last fund that I want to mention is the Energize Colorado Gap Fund. For those who may have heard of it, it's the state recently created this along with some of our other partners in response to the impact COVID has had on small businesses across the state. So we have the fund will provide around 25 million in small business loans and grants to boost small businesses, especially in rural parts of the state. $5 million of this grant money has been earmarked specifically for tourism and outdoor recreation businesses. And priority is will be given to Black, Indigenous, people of color, veteran, and minority-owned businesses. So it's another really great initiative. Yeah.
Those are great. I should have limited it to 3. 'Cause I'm just teasing. Those are all great. And we actually invited Dr. Davis to be part of the panel, but she had a conflict, so she couldn't join. She's doing great work with inclusion on the slopes. And
Absolutely.
the Elk fundraiser is really inspiring. If you've ever been to one of those events where you hear the kids that are participants and what they're doing, great things in their lives. So those are all great initiatives.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that you mentioned a few different times was this advisory board. Which I know Annalisa and I are proud to be a part of. And I will say one of my first impressions on being on that was just getting a totally different perspective of the outdoors. You guys have done a great job of adding constituents, which, you know, a four-wheeling community person with somebody that's hunting, with somebody that's mountain biking, and you just start to realize there are so many different groups that love being in the outdoors. So there's a common denominator there that I think we can all focus on. Everybody comes about it from a different perspective, and it's not, at times those can be conflicting, right? So one that I would love for you to maybe just add a little bit more color on is, how did you go about not just the advisory board, but how do you guys in your office go about ensuring that you get to hear from all different types of constituents and part of the community that are interested in the outdoors here in Colorado? How do you make those people have a seat at the table?
Yeah. So I would say at the state level, since we do come under the governor's offices, Governor Polis recently signed an executive order to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion across all of the state government. And this is to ensure that all employees feel engaged and can really bring their true selves to work. As a part of this effort, all of our state employees will be receiving EDI training, which is really designed to provide just a common understanding of equality, diversity, and inclusion, just the historical context, and then the interventions for disrupting bias. So it's one of the governor's really key goals to build a Colorado for all, and make sure this philosophy reaches all areas related to policy, legislative priorities, as well as executive action. Within OERIT, so the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, we have formed an EDI committee. So this has a representation from every division within OERIT being one of them, to really examine all of our current programs and funding opportunities to make sure that they're equitable and inclusive of all Coloradans, and also to examine and improve our internal OERIT hiring processes, Lima was saying, and as well as the leadership structure. I would say within OREC, we've been extremely intentional, as you said, extremely intentional about selecting our advisory group members as well as our executive committee members, so that the members really represent social, cultural, geographical, as well as racial diversity. Our advisory group really helps inform not just the purpose and the mission of the office, but also a lot of the office's programs and the development of recommendations which inform the governor's policies on outdoor recreation matters. So it's really key that this group contains organizations with diverse outdoor recreation interests, as you mentioned, all different types of outdoor activities, but are really committed to improving Coloradans' health and quality of life, and overall strengthening our economy through outdoor recreation.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. I do think you guys are doing a good job. And one of the things that I've seen you do more recently that I think is actually your responsibility was this Recreate Responsibly campaign, where through Instagram and through other social media accounts, you're kind of talking about what does it mean to recreate responsibly. So can you maybe chime in on why you did that and that campaign, and what does that have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors?
Yeah, absolutely. So the office recently led the formation of the Recreate Responsibly Colorado Coalition. This is under the umbrella of the National Recreate Responsibly Coalition. The National Coalition has over 700 members, or 750, I think, is what I last heard, and was initially formed back in April by industry leaders from nonprofits, outdoor businesses such as REI, which has really taken the lead, and land management agencies, with the goal of developing and sharing best practices for recreating outdoors, specifically during the pandemic, and still protecting each other as well as our natural landscapes. Colorado is one of a handful of states that have now formed their own state coalitions just to give the backstory, so that we can really develop and amplify state-specific guidance for recreating outdoors, which is where this campaign that we recently ran comes in. We, in conjunction with our states, with Colorado's land management agencies, we ran a campaign before Labor Day weekend, and the week before Labor Day weekend, to really reach out to those new, and I want to say under-informed outdoor users with responsible recreation education. As you all are likely aware, our outdoor spaces really saw a lot of unprecedented visitation numbers this past summer, largely due to COVID, which resulted in a lot of overuse and potentially permanent damage, such as high levels of trash at trailheads and campsites, or erosion and vegetation damage, illegal recreational use, aggressive behavior towards park rangers, for example. So as part of this campaign, Governor Polis issued a proclamation declaring this week, the week before Labor Day, as Colorado Recreates Responsibly Week. And then along with the coalition members, of course, as well as industry partners, we focused on amplifying one of the 7 Recreate Responsibly principles each day of the week via social media. So it's mainly a social media campaign. To tie it back in, one of the 7 key Recreate Responsibly principles is to really build an inclusive outdoors. So playing an active part in making the outdoors safe and welcoming for all identities and abilities, no matter how each one of us chooses to experience the outdoors. So there's really been a huge push from the coalition to get this message out there and ensure that truly everyone is able to benefit from spending time outdoors. The last I heard, social impressions for hashtag Recreate Responsibly were at 432 million. So it's pretty incredible. Yeah, yep, the work of the coalition.
That's awesome. Yeah, keep up your work. I think I was following all of your posts that week, and was awesome to see how people recreate responsibly and what they take that to mean. So that's great. I think keeping people informed about the usage is definitely important to not only promote usage, but to promote it in a way that preserves it for future generations. So
absolutely.
Thanks. And I want to just remind the audience, feel free to chime in. We are going to get to the Q&A here in a minute. I want to ask Annalisa a few questions, and then we'll turn to your questions. So please feel free to chime in. And I think that one of the things that Avanti was talking about with regards to recreate responsibly, Annalisa, actually segues pretty well to one of the things that I think you've done well with Icelandic, which is focusing on why we recreate, but more specifically, when we were talking in advance of this presentation, you had an interesting interpretation of what does recreation mean and how that relates to diversity and inclusion. So do you mind sharing that with the audience?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because similar to what Avanti said with the recreate responsibly, and if you look up the word recreate, it means create again or renewal. And I just love kind of thinking about recreation like that, as, especially outdoor recreation is a time of renewal, a time of, a time for us to fill our cup and, experience the solace and wonder of nature. And a big sort of theme that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I'm so lucky to be on, be able to be on the board with you, Mike, and Avanti, or the advisory council, and be amongst all these great thinkers, but is the idea of outdoor recreation. What is that? And funny, coming from me as a supplier in the outdoor world who sells skis and makes a living selling product, I'm really passionate about getting the word out, or, changing the mindset around what is outdoor recreation. Because to me, planting a seed in your window box, a carrot seed, and watching it grow is connect. And this kind of goes back to like return to nature, which is our company's mantra too. But just the idea of changing our mindset and our perspective and our idea of what it means to recreate outside. And it doesn't mean you have to buy a $200 pair of boots and go hike up a 14er. It means you can go to the river on a Wednesday afternoon with your family and have a picnic. And that is just as important and just as valuable and beneficial as as summiting, 14er or whatever. So I think like part of the barrier to entry in our industry is cost. And we know that. It's expensive to buy gear. Obviously access, there's a lot to access, but cost is a big one. And so I feel like the more we can unify our voice as an outdoor industry, yes, but also just as a group of people that, want to save the world, which I believe we can do through, connecting people back to nature. But the more we can kind of like reframe what it means to participate in outdoor recreation, I think the better we're all gonna be. Like a rising tide floats all ships, and kind of detaching ourselves as suppliers in the outdoor industry from making just a profit, but also looking at increasing participation and diversity and inclusion both in our companies and in user base is a good thing. So that was a long answer to a short question, but
no, that's a great answer. And I think you hit on a couple of different points there, several of which I can relate to, right? When I first moved to Colorado, I wanted to hike all the 14ers and ski the double black diamonds, do all these extreme things. Now I'm married with kids and being able to walk and go fishing, which means my son's throwing rocks while I'm trying to fish. Right? That's a huge outdoor experience. So it's very different from where I started, when I first moved here. So I can totally relate to that. And I think you being Icelandic have done a good job of doing that. You mentioned your logo of Return to Nature, which I think is great, right? Because there's an element of getting outdoors that is the wonder, the awe, the enjoyment, the refreshing and recreating yourself. And it's also sort of a fun experience too. And I think you've done a good job of balancing being outdoors, right? You still do have to sell product, right? Your ski company, right? Pay your bills. But how do you think that's been helpful in opening up, whether it be new markets, females or younger users, or what have you done from a business perspective too? Because I do agree that it's really important to get outdoors, but you have to be being CEO to your business as well. So has that been a conscious decision, or maybe just expound a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And if I reflect on that, I do think that, we've always kind of done, a big core value of our company is to authentically express ourselves and to remain true. I always call it our nucleus, who are we? And like Kalima said, we're changing all the time. People are changing all the time. The world is changing all the time. So it's a very regular thing that we do as a company is checking in with ourselves. Who am I today? Who are we today? Does this still fit? Does this still resonate? So Return to Nature has kind of stood the test of time over, several years now. It's does this still resonate? And yes, because it can mean so many different things, right? To me right now, Return to Nature is returning to myself underneath all of the societal conditioning that I've been exposed to, and just kind of coming back to myself, and that's just as important as anything else. But so I think by way of doing that, by way of operating from this place of truth as we know it, which is just what's important to you, what lights you up, what serves you, what feeds you, everything like that, we have kind of, in a way, not pigeonholed ourselves into a specific target market. Our investors used to always ask us for our demographic, and we're there's not one, it doesn't exist, but it's a psychographic. It's a mindset, it's people who are open to expansion and new experiences and all these things. So I think just kind of by way of operating from a place of truth, we've had a very broad and inclusive message, and that our common our motto has to do with nature, which is what we're all here for, in our customer base. It's just kind of open and inclusive. It's not really, like I said, sort of pigeonholed. And then with women, I think that, I'm a woman and I run the company. So I just saw that, a lot of companies just don't cater to women, and women are mothers. And another part of the access discussion is I think it's the second reason why people don't ski in particular is that they don't have a role model to take them skiing. Like, you need money and you need a person that shows you the ropes. Mothers are like the number one person. And so when mothers stop skiing, then that line of like, you know, continuation in like a familial ski tradition ends. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I was inspired by hearing that stat one time. I didn't give you a stat, but just the idea that women are mothers and, you know, they're big influencers on the family. So I was we need to
that's
sell
great.
women's skis.
Well, you saw all kinds of great skis, but I do know that it seems like a large portion of them are women. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was introduced to skiing by my mom. Was never to make it on our spring break trips, but my mom was, and I have distinct memories of her screaming down a green out of control the first time she went down. Great family experience that we love it. We fell in love with it, and we go every year now. So I love that you guys are using that broad, inclusive language as part of who you are, because I think that's one of the things that resonates amongst all kinds of different user groups. And that's one of the things that everyone loves about the outdoors, is it helps bring you back to yourself, figure out who you are, get you energized to come back into the world or the city and the craziness that's going on now in the pandemic.
Yeah. Amen.
What about you, though, being a female CEO in a somewhat male-dominated outdoor industry? I know that you started this with co-founders from middle school friends, but what have you learned about yourself, or what barriers have you overcome? Like, what would you tell the audience about your experience leading a company in the industry?
I've gotten a lot more wrinkles since I became CEO. No, yeah, I mean, it's been a really, you know, it's easy, I think, to, well, yeah, I'm like a token woman CEO in the industry, and it's such a bummer, because I wish there was like way more of us. But I get this question all the time, and it's like, it was not easy. It really wasn't. And even though, you know, like the ski, I don't know, there's all sorts of things that could say that I like, it was easy for me just because of the way I look or whatever. It's like, I had to overcome a lot of stuff personally, just in terms of like self-worth and finding my voice and standing in my power and all that sort of stuff. And to, you know, sort of earn respect from other constituents in the industry. And it's been, I say this all the time, it's been my number one spiritual journey, like in my life, you know, committing to this company, and then committing to not only being a leader, but finding my own style of leadership within a paradigm that doesn't really cater to or recognize or celebrate this type of leadership that I'm bringing. So it's taken a lot of courage and a lot of therapy and a lot of, just kind of a lot of years off my life, I think. But I'm going to, you know, we're coming. I think I'm in a good place now, and I hope that my path that we're building, and there are other women CEOs for sure. I'm not saying I'm the only one, but I just hope more women find the courage to step into it, because nothing's going to change until, you know, we diversify leadership even more, you know.
Yeah, 73% of CEOs are male. So
outdoor industry specific, or just across?
No, just across the board, just across the board. And so my hat's off to you for leading that charge.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you for blazing a trail, and I'm sure it's been very difficult, but everything that I've seen, you've been doing a great job, Annalisa. So keep it up. I do want to. We're getting close to the end of our time, so there's a few questions here and there that I may throw back to the panel, but I want to transition a little bit to the questions from the audience.
Absolutely.
We've gotten a few of those. And so one comes from Angela Wilson, and she was commenting specifically on diversity of the outdoors with regards to people with physical disabilities. And what have we seen, right? Because there are barriers to getting outdoors to some locations, for example, right? If you're in a wheelchair, some hiking trails are not accessible. Even skiing, there's some ski areas that are really not accessible to people with disabilities. But our question is really, how's the industry or maybe Annalise for Icelandic, how are you as a business, but how are we seeing not just access to the outdoors, but how are we seeing access to employment opportunities? How are those changing? So maybe Kalima, I'll turn it to you first, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free.
Absolutely. Actually, the American Disabilities Act of 1990, it put quite a few legal ramifications in place to ensure that individuals with disabilities have equal access. And what we're teaching through our a diverse talent pipeline learning sprint is to ensure that everyone has access. So your job descriptions, you're not putting, for an example, in every job description, specifically those that are in office, you need to type 60 words a minute. Okay, so you're just implying that an individual has arms, but there's assistive technology that's out there where a person can input data probably faster than a typer just by using their mouth. And so what we're trying to teach our companies, our corporate partners, and all of those that are enrolled in our program is, you can't limit people in any way. There are so many different levels of bias that you have to be aware of and be careful of to make sure that you eliminate so that everyone has access, so that individuals, there's ageism, there's disability, there's so many that I could name, but specifically around disability, American Disabilities Act has done a lot of work there. And there's a lot of assistive technology out there that evens the playing field for those that are disabled.
Yeah, and I've seen that too in counseling clients, because that actually even goes to as far as website accessibility.
Absolutely.
Outdoor companies, I mean, all kinds of industries, but specifically for outdoor, you have to have alt text that somebody that is vision impaired can be able to access your website and understand and be able to use it, to shop or to do whatever. So there's functionality there that it even applies at that level, that I see as in a lot of the work that I do with counseling clients. I don't know, Annalise or Avanti, do you have any other thoughts on accessibility to those with disabilities for employment in the outdoor industry?
No, but I am learning a lot from Kalima. That's, and I would love to work with you on our next job description and stuff, because you don't even think about that,
Absolutely.
You have to type 60 words a minute or something, implying. So no, I don't, I want to say we're open to everybody, and, but when the rubber hits the road, I think that's when you really see. So I want to learn from you.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's great. It reminded me of when I broke my hand after mountain biking. I couldn't help my wife with our newborn, and I couldn't really work either. I was trying to use some technology, and I realized I just take this stuff for granted, right? That
absolutely
I'm very blessed with, that others don't have. So there was another question that dealt with ageism in the outdoor industry. And I think there's probably a number of different facets to that with regards to, the gear that you buy or companies that look to hire you, and et cetera. But the question is really getting around how is ageism addressed? It was specifically addressed to you, Kalima, with regards to Camber. Like, how do you look at ageism in the industry? But I'd love to hear Avanti or Annalise if you've seen it in the industry or seen it counteracted in a good way. So I don't know if that's part of your training, Kalima, or how do you teach companies to deal with ageism?
Absolutely. We have so many different generations that are currently in the workplace, and each generation has something to teach the other. And so when we have individuals that are a little older, we have to make sure that and we go back to our job description. Our job descriptions, everything's technology. Everything's technology. And you'll see job descriptions that say things like looking for a tech savvy or a digital aged individual. My 94-year-old mother can still use a computer, a laptop, and a cell phone. So anyone can learn technology. It doesn't matter their age. Also, statements like, no more than 7 years experience on your job descriptions, or graduating from an Ivy League university within the last 4 years. All of those are illegal questions or illegal things that go into job descriptions that a lot of individuals don't realize. And so it's so important. And I always suggest, and I'm giving away a little bit of our talent sprint, but I always suggest that you have a talent acquisition team where you can vet those job descriptions. You're making sure that you're looking for specific core skills, and you're not so much worried about the like to haves, but more important, the must haves.
That's great. I think that's much needed work. I don't know if there's anything else, Avanti or Annalisa, you wanted to add on the topic of ageism in the industry.
I will. I mean, just because we really pride ourselves on, like I said, not having a demographic that we talk to and sell to. And we celebrate, and I absolutely love the fact that we have skiers on our skis that are 90 years old and 6 years old, so I mean, that's our customers. And then again, with our hiring, we have I don't know, probably 4 different generations in our little company too. And so, and that feels good. I'm all about diversity in general in ecosystems. And so I think, not that I'm any expert by any means, but I just know the importance of different perspectives and experiences. So we try to do that. It's never been a super, intentional thing, but it's happened naturally. So
that's the best way, though, to foster a community and culture that it happens naturally and it's not forced. So you're doing something right in that regard. And we're getting close to the end of our time. So I want to say thank you to each of you for being a panel, but I want to end this on a sort of a good note. So a higher note, right? We've got enough between the wildfires and the pandemic and other things that can drag us down. So what is something that each of you has seen that the outdoor industry is doing really well with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion that gives you hope for the future? And Avanti, I don't know, maybe I'll start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just even recognizing that we're privileged and acknowledging that there's barriers with cost, but also lack of representation of communities of color in marketing efforts. And with this acknowledgement, actually grappling with how to move the needle on supporting DEI efforts. And I've seen so many organizations have already made it a part of their everyday conversations. And just, I feel like acknowledging it and working on it is definitely a huge plus. I was reading a couple of articles and they spoke of this past summer, we in the US, we've hit records on just the number of people, the number of people of color seen outdoors, or the visitation numbers of people of color have been the highest ever. So we're definitely doing something right, I would say.
Kalima?
I absolutely agree with everything that she said. Just the recognition that there are barriers that need to overcome, and the desire to overcome those barriers. You'd be surprised how many organizations and companies are saying, what do we need to do to fix this? What do we need to do to overcome and eliminate these barriers to access? So I'm in total agreement.
That's great. And Annalise, anything that gives you hope?
These two ladies.
That's great.
Yeah.
Agreed. And actually, all of you give me hope. So keep up the great work with promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoor recreation economy. And thank you so much again for spending part of your afternoon and being involved with Denver Startup Week. So that's the least that I can do, but I want to say thank you. And then I do want to just wrap up to the audience to say that, we're glad that you joined us. We hope that you continue to be part of the conversation. There's so many ways that you can get involved. Avanti talked about ELKs or diversity and inclusion on the slopes. There's many other organizations in the industry that you can get involved with. So we would encourage you to do that. Camber Outdoors actually hosts a bunch of events, especially around outdoor retailer. So we'd encourage you to just get more and more involved and continue to stay part of the conversation and promoting diversity, equity, inclusion in your workplaces and in the outdoors in general. So thank you for being part of this Denver Startup Week event, which is the largest entrepreneurial event of its kind. And make sure that you share this session. I think it'll be available via video replay on YouTube. So thank you again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure meeting you, ladies.
Yeah,
All right.
you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.